All right, you guys. I think we are about live, or Lisa says we're live. So hello, 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 Coastal Georgia, and welcome to tonight's forum. This is the first time that we as a collective from Democratic committees within the 1st Congressional District and the Federation of Democratic Women within the district have come, joined together to host one mega forum, and we hope that you get the most bang for your buck for this information. We like to thank our candidates, Joyce Griggs and Dr. Michelle Munroe and Wade Herring, for participating tonight. And we would like to also thank our moderators, which are Dr. Deidre, who is the CCFDW, which is the Chatham County Federation of Democratic Women chair, and Julie Jordan, who is the GlynnDems chair out of Glynn County. You all, this is a very important forum, so we hope that you all enjoy it. Please feel free to share this on any social page that you may deem may need this information. And let's just hope that we get everything that we need in regards to the 1st Congressional District and the information that we're seeking for the 1st Congressional District. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to the moderators.
Good evening.
Go ahead, Deidre.
Good evening, Coastal Georgia. We just thank you again, like Chairwoman Newby stated, for joining us this evening. I am Dr. Deidre Grimm. I am the chair of the Chatham County Federation of Democratic Women and have many other hats in the community, but I'm here today specifically to get to know our candidates who are running for office and why they should represent us. I will turn this over to my co-moderator, Ms. Julie Jordan.
Good evening, and thank everyone for joining us tonight. This is exciting, one of the first forums leading up to our May primaries. So we are going to start by having the candidates introduce themselves. They have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Sabrina, are you going to take over, or do you want them to go ahead and start? All right, why don't we start with Joyce Griggs. Joyce, you have 2 minutes to introduce us. Introduce yourself to all of us.
Thank you so very much. And most of all, thank you all for sponsoring this forum tonight. I think it's a very important forum for all concerned. And so the people, the 1st District, can get to know those that are running for office. But in any event, I am Joyce Marie Griggs, and I am running for U.S. Congress, as all you know. I would like to point out that in 2020, I was a Democratic nominee during that time. Also, I received more votes than anyone ever against Buddy Carter. So we really put a dent in it, and I appreciate everybody that supported us. I am a combat veteran. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. Went to Iraq 3 times. I'm a Bronze Star recipient. And I was also in the Army an intelligence officer. I worked with the U.S. Embassy in Iraq to write legally binding agreement between America and the Iraqi government. So I've done a whole bunch in the military and also in the civilian sector. I am a former lawyer. No, I do not practice law, and I don't want anyone to get this confused. I do not practice law. I lost my law license back in 2006. So no one can say that I said that I'm practicing law. I want to clear that up front. Okay. And if anybody have any questions about it, they can let me know. But in any event, I would like to say in the Stubbs case in 2009, it specifically said Griggs was overruled. Okay. So I want to clear that up front. So if there's any questions, you all can call me. My number is 912-316-6009. Okay. So no one can say that I put out misleading or false information. Now, just a little bit more about me. I grew up the middle of 10 children in rural North Carolina. We were in poverty. Okay, my mom didn't have a formal education, but she gave us good stuff. She instilled good stuff in us. She basically said you treat people the way you want to be treated, and you love all people because God made us all. So a lot of things that she instilled in me throughout life, I took them with me. Now, one day we worked in the fields. One day I told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm going to college and get an education. I'm not coming back to this. Not that I thought I was so much better, but because I knew that I could do better, that I could make a difference, that I could have an impact on people's life. So I did. I worked my way through college. undergrad and graduate school. And I worked 2 jobs on campus. I worked one on campus and one off campus to get enough money to pay for my tuition. And what was great about it, at the end of that, I did not have student loans. So thank God for that. And then later on, I went back to law school, John Marshall in Atlanta, Georgia. And of course, I used my GI Bill there. But I've been very active in the community, not just here, but throughout Southeast Georgia. For example, in Camden County, I worked with a doctor up there, a minister who had a program where he fed the homeless, and he also had a shelter. So I worked with Dr. Ham, Reverend Ham rather, up there in Woodbine area, up in Camden County. I've also stood with the Albray's family up in Glenn County. I was up there from day one until the verdict came in of guilty pleas. So I marched with them, I cried with them, I prayed with them. Also locally, I've been involved with Citizens for Environmental Justice, even Healthy Savannah, making sure that my little store that we carry, Dr. Graham knows about that, carry healthy food for the kids, because most of the time they just get junk. So we stress healthy eating. So in any event, so I've been very involved, not just that, but I've done so much. I've worked with schools. I've been in schools. I've given talks on career days, okay, right in Savannah at Hubert School. I worked with the social worker there for students. So I've done a lot. And you know, all of my life experiences, my civil experience, my military experience has prepared me for such a time as this to run for U.S. Congress of the 1st Congressional District. I would like to say this also. Some are saying that it would take a white male to beat Buddy Carter. Let it be known that any number of us women can beat Buddy Carter if we come together, if we form the momentum behind the candidate and not looking at a male or whatever. But you know, just being a male can't beat Buddy Carter. He's a male, okay? And he's not doing us a very good job. But any of us females could beat Buddy Carter. And guess what? I believe I am the best one to beat Buddy Carter. Look at what I got last time. Each time I went up 10 percentage points. And this time, guess what? We go up 10 points because I got over 47% last time. We win the nomination. We win, all right? And we even win against Buddy Carter. In any event, I am for all people. I am for all people, as I said. I don't care what race, sex, orientation, whatever. I am for all people. I'm a fighter for all people. I don't take bribes and I can't be bought. Also, I'm not running for me, but I am running for the people of the 1st Congressional District because we have not been properly represented, okay? There's so many issues that we must address. This district is so diverse, okay? From the coast to the urban area, to the rural poor, hospitals, no hospitals. It's sad, children going hungry, healthcare. It is absolutely sad. In any event, there's a lot of issues that we have to deal with. And my website is Joyce Griggs 2022. And you can look at that. You can also ask me questions later. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Griggs.
Go ahead, Deidre. We'll get this down.
So I guess that leads us to the man of the hour, Mr. Wade Herring. If you could please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Wade Herring. Thank you for this opportunity to be in this forum with you this evening. The task here is to introduce myself. I grew up in Macon, Georgia. My dad had been in the military. He got a job with vocational rehabilitation, helping disabled people get training and education and jobs. My mother, who's still alive, was a public school teacher in the Bibb County school system for 30 years. And that's where I got my education, was in the Bibb County public school system. I went away to college, came back to Georgia to go to law school at the University of Georgia. That's where I met my wife, Susan. We've been married 39 years. We moved to Savannah in 1985, where I had the opportunity to work with Malcolm McLean, who had been mayor of the city of Savannah in the early 60s. It was Mr. McLean working and listening with civil rights leaders like W.W. Law and Eugene Gadsden, who helped peacefully desegregate the city of Savannah that summer of '63. And I always admired Mr. McLean's integrity and courage and wondered if I would have the courage when my time came, when my nation needed me. I've worked since I was 14 years old. My first job was digging ditches in a pecan grove down in Perry, Georgia. I worked one summer on a tobacco farm. I worked my way through college and through law school, and I've worked ever since. And that one of the reasons I'm running is because I am a worker, and the people of this district deserve someone who will work for them. I decided to run because of January the 6th, when Betty Carter voted to overturn the election. That seemed like such a fundamental violation of his oath of office that I had to get off the sidelines. And so I'm working for the people of this district to make a change in Washington so that we have someone who believes in the Constitution, who believes in telling the truth. I'm working for the promises that America still has to keep, not looking backward at a yesterday that never was. That's why I'm running for Congress.
Thank you, Wade. Now we're going to hear from our final candidate, Dr. Michelle Munroe.
Thank you, Julie, Dr. Grimm. Thank you all for being here this evening. It's very important, and I really appreciate this opportunity to get together and learn about each other. So I am Dr. Michelle Munroe, and I'm a trusted leader for change. I'm trusted because I'm a nurse and a midwife, and it's the #1 trusted profession 20 years in a row by Gallup polls. I'm a proven leader. I've been a military officer and retired after 28.5 years of service at Fort Stewart. I was the hospital commander, not just the hospital commander, but the first female hospital commander for Wynn Army Community Hospital in its 53 years of existence. I also was the hospital commander when the pandemic hit. So it was my job to ensure that 85,000 beneficiaries that we serviced, all active duty, family members, and retirees, were provided the care that kept them safe throughout the pandemic. And I did that with not one life lost. I am a proven change agent. As a military officer, you move jobs every 2 to 3 years. The job of a congressperson is a 2-year term. You can be reelected, but you don't know that. So as a military officer, I know how to get things done within that 2-year timeline, because as we have to do that to make change, and then we get our next assignment. So it's so imperative to have a change agent in this time, because we need a lot of change in coastal Georgia from across the coastal 1st Congressional District. It's important. So a little bit about me. As I said, 28.5 years in the military. I'm the first officer in our family, but I have 3 generations of families of our family who have served in the military from every service. And I have a wall in my house that has all those generations pictures up, and it reminds me every day that we are a family that serves. I think about also how I got to this point. My family, I became a nurse I thought about it at 6 years old. And so I really understand the impact that education and your childhood development can have on you. Because at 6 years old, my mom had Hodgkin's disease. And it was the nurses that took care of her that formulated that impression of something that I should do later in life. And I still remember that nurse's name that took care of her, Nurse Cadret. It's amazing to think that someone can impact a life so early on, but it does happen. And that's what I think about as we go into this congressional race, is who's going to have the biggest impact on this district. I also, as many of the others alluded, I have worked my way through school. As I said, I'm the first officer in our family, but I'm also the first person to go to college. So I grew up in inner city Baltimore, right out on the outskirts of Baltimore. I worked my way through school, and I worked as delivering newspapers in our neighborhood to start off with. And then I worked as a service aide at St. Agnes Hospital in Baltimore. And that's really where I formulated the idea also to be in that healthcare field. It really reinforced that initial desire at 6 years old. And so I really believe in education. I believe in working hard, and I believe for working for each other. And as a military member, we help each other. We lift each other up because we don't have families around us. But when I moved to coastal Georgia, when I moved to Fort Stewart, I fell in love. I fell in love with this area. I fell in love with the people, and I fell in love with everything that this area does for not only each other, but as you see lots of visitors and tourists come in, and we take care of all of that. And so I think we need a congressperson who will represent every ounce of every person that lives and works in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe. So right now we are going to start asking questions. Dr. Grimm and I will alternate questions, and the candidates have 2 minutes to answer them. There will be a little wave with a balloon, a red balloon, to let you know that you have 10 seconds left, so that you need to wrap up. If you continue going past the time limit, then we will just mute you. So hopefully you'll keep your comments moving along so we can ask as many questions as possible. I'm going to go ahead and start this question. We'll start with Mr. Herring. So this question is about voting rights. In 2021, 52 restrictive voter laws were passed across the country in state legislatures, including SB 202 here in Georgia. In 2022, we have seen even more voter suppression laws, which disproportionately affect Black voters, be brought up and passed in state legislatures. When elected, what would you do to challenge these discriminatory laws? Mr. Herring?
Yes, thank you. The very reason I am running is because of voting rights. Representative Carter stood on the floor of the House on the night of January 6, 2021, to vote to take away the right to vote, the voting rights of all of us who had voted for Democratic candidates in November. That's what happened. That's why I'm running. And I've been very consistent throughout my campaign, which went public last July, that my #1 priority was voting rights. One of my colleagues came to my office on January the 7th and said, it can't get worse than this. I said, yes, it can. And so we saw a Senate bill, the Georgia Senate bill you alluded to, Julie, pass here in Georgia and many other states. So #1, we need federal legislation to protect voting rights. And the #1 thing we need to do is restore some teeth to the Voting Rights Act, to restore Department of Justice review to the Voting Rights Act. That is absolutely #1, and that would be my top priority.
Thank you. Dr. Munroe?
Thank you, Julie, for that question. Voting rights, as we've seen in Georgia, there has been huge voter suppression, and it continues and continues. And these latest laws of voter suppression, of limiting districts and limiting, even handing somebody a glass of water, is even worse than what I could have imagined, like Wade mentioned. And it's interesting to me that it seems like we're the only ones that are standing up to fight for this. Why isn't this something across the board that is important to everyone? It is in some ways, and let me clarify that. I think we need to make the general election a holiday so that we don't have to look at the ability for people to come out to vote. We will open up the ability for everyone to come out to vote, because they will not have to work. They will have the access. They will have the ability to come out to their polls because they will not be at work. And that will open up the ability and hopefully encourage people to come out to vote because they don't have to go to work that day. Because what I hear is a lot of employers say, oh, you don't have to go do that. Or they don't let them, or they make it difficult for people to get off work to go to the voting polls. So by making the general election at a start a federal holiday, it would allow people to access and time to go to the polls, to get out to vote and make change. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Now, Joyce.
Yes, thank you so very much. You know, voting is so important. It's a fundamental constitutional right for all people. And what is disturbing to me is that so many died for the ability to vote. Black, whites, Jews, you name it. All ethnic groups died so that people could vote. And it's a travesty that we are in 2022 and we have such restrictive voting rules that each state legislator have imposed. I tell you what, number one, what we need to do in the state of Georgia, we need to make sure we get legislators at the state level, because see, they're writing the laws for the state, to make sure we have the right legislators in place to make sure that they are for voting rights, that they would not restrict the voting rights. Let me point out, in 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court basically said that we didn't need any more safeguards for voting because African Americans and other minorities had reached a level playing field in voting, which is a lie. Okay, so that's what they did. That's where it started. So as a result, they started gutting that Voting Rights Act more and more and more. So what I will do as your next Congresswoman, I will fight to strengthen the Voting Rights Act again. I will, if I have to, I will go sit on President Biden's desk. You know, he has a lot of power as the president. Okay, but I will work with my colleagues so we can strengthen the voting rights and get rid of all this restricted, because that is a fundamental constitutional right. We need to be charging those that are violating our rights with crimes. That's what we need to be doing. Okay, but unfortunately, it's not enough right people in the right places. But I will fight to strengthen the voter rights. And especially, you know what's disturbing? Especially with the absentee ballots. You got a lot of people that are shut in. Okay, a lot of people that are sick or that can't get out, but they're requiring in Georgia certain things to vote absentee ballot. And that's unfortunately, and that shouldn't be. This is 2022. Unfortunately, we're going backwards. Black folks died, stood in line. And I would say to any and everyone, stand in those lines, get out to vote. Don't give up. Let's make a change. Let's start with our state legislators. We got to put people in place that will push the voting rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs.
Thank you.
The next question I have is around economics. We have seemingly been in the perfect storm since 2019, a pandemic that has killed millions worldwide, a supply chain crisis that has prompted inflation on many levels, and now a war that researchers believe will continue at least until the summer. History has shown that we should be preparing ourselves for at least a recession, especially seeing that there are talks in reference to raising interest rates. Please lay out your plan to ensure that our economy recovers from the pressures of the last 3 years. Mr. Herring, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Number one, the economy has a lot of strengths, and I think it's important that we recognize that. Inflation is a problem. That is absolutely a concern. But when we look at economic growth in the United States over the last year, it's strong. Unemployment is at a historic low. New business starts are at an historic high. We've heard about the Great American Resignation, and people don't quit their jobs if they're afraid they can't get a job. People are quitting their jobs to go get better jobs or to start their own company. So that's number one. And the media narrative that somehow the economy is bad is a false narrative. That said, we do need to recognize the reality of the recession, and we do need to of inflation. We're not in a recession, and we need to be prepared. One of the ways that we can do that in our district, let's focus on the first district, is to make sure that this district gets its fair share of the infrastructure money from the infrastructure bill that is already passed, and make sure that our district gets its fair share and that local businesses get their fair share to bid and participate in those jobs. And then let's work for education, early childhood especially. Let's work for accessible, affordable health care, and let's work for lower drug prices. Those are the kinds of things that we can do and that a Democratic Congress can do to get ready for whatever economic bad times may be ahead of us.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe. Oh, excuse me. Did we go? It's Griggs. I'm sorry, it's you next.
Okay, in reference to the economy, a lot has happened, like you said, especially with the pandemic, so many people dying, companies folding, companies can't find employees, or people don't want to go back. So what I would propose is that we make sure that we provide living wages to people. They can't make it off $5 an hour, $7.50 an hour rather. They just can't. A lot of people that I know, some of them are working 3 jobs just to put food on the table. That's not talking about any niceties. So I say, number one, what we have to do is make sure we give the people a living wage, okay? And then also, we need to make sure jobs, the infrastructure, okay? There's monies, a lot of monies available through that program. And we need to make sure we get it to the 1st Congressional District. We need to make sure we invest in the technology-oriented jobs. See, so much is changing and the technology is huge. So we need to make sure we have job training programs, okay? For example, even the unions have apprenticeship. We need to make sure we push apprentice programs. This district is so diverse, and we need to make sure that we do all these things. Education, we need to make sure we have people properly trained for certain jobs. We need to make it easier for people to get their education and not be burdened and saddled with all these student loans. Because let's face it, that's a drain on the economy in itself. When you have $100,000 in student loans and you're only making $50,000 a year, that's just not a balance. So I will push those type of things. And like I said before, the infrastructure, technology, and I will work with my colleagues, okay, to come up to help boost the economy. I would also listen, number one, to my constituents to see what they want. And I think that's key for any leader, is to listen to your constituents, to see what their desires are, to see what their needs are. As a matter of fact, you got to get down with the constituents to make sure you understand what they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. And Dr. Munroe.
Thank you, Dr. Grimm, for that question. So you are correct. The pandemic has hit our country a whole lot. And there are multiple facets to this issue. We saw the resignation, the large amount of resignations, but that is multifaceted. There are people who are going to other jobs. So that's kudos to them. They're getting higher wages and they're moving on and they're doing better, getting promotions and we see that. But the other thing we see that has not been mentioned is that we've had moms have to leave the workplace in order to take care of their children through the pandemic. We've had families who have suffered in this pandemic because of the lack of ability to take care of their children in a virtual education process. The other thing we saw is small businesses affected the most because they could apply for the CARES Act. Some of them were able to, but some of them didn't even know the process in order to get the CARES Act money, or were denied CARES Act money. So we saw small businesses and restaurants close at all the local locations. And I see that not necessarily from the franchises, but those small locally owned businesses. So what I would like to do is actually help them decrease their tax rate in some way, shape, or form so that they can have a little bit of reprieve in the taxes that are affecting them. And I also would like to help everyone in this district by augmenting or decreasing, or for a time period, getting rid of our state and federal gas tax act. Thank you.
Okay, our next question will continue with workforce. And as a follow-up, workforce development has been touted as a key to eliminate not only unemployment, but underemployment, and preparing Georgians for the next Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos to call Georgia home. But the pandemic has proven that workers are not willing to kill themselves to make others rich. With the Great Resignation ongoing, what do you believe can be done to ensure that Georgia jobs steadily grow and have a workforce that is paid a livable wage to fill the positions? Dr. Munroe, you're up first.
Thank you, Julie. Well, as I mentioned, people are leaving jobs to go to higher paying jobs, but one of the things that we need to do is we need to increase the minimum wage to $15. That's imperative. Just by doing that, we will help families to hopefully be able to support themselves. The goal of any person working in a family is to care for and provide for their family. That's their goal. So whether they're working one job or 2 or 3 jobs, that's the whole entire goal, to provide for the basic needs. And so in my opinion, it would be best if we could provide that within that $15 an hour minimum, and it would allow that ability to decrease the number of families that are at the poverty level. We also need to think about one of the things with the poverty level is that people can't pay for healthcare insurance because they don't have enough money to support themselves. And so they have to make a decision. Do they pay for healthcare or do they pay for their basic needs? And so there are many families that are choosing and need to choose their basic healthcare needs over healthcare. We need to change that, and we can do that by raising that minimum wage to $15. Thank you.
Thank you. Joyce, you're up.
Thank you so very much. Looking at the workforce, let's face it, it is so important that we have trained, able and willing workers around us or in the workforce. Now, what I would say is that we could come up with some type of incentive to get workers to go back to work. For example, we could say your taxes would be abated or reduced for a certain amount of time if you stay on that job. And then the flip side, we could also give the employer perhaps a tax break for hiring that person. And what I would say is that as far as workforce development, I think we need to start matching up more the needs of the employer to the employee and find those that will fit those jobs. And we can get, like I said, we can give incentives for the employer, tax breaks. We could even give incentives for the employee. And again, we must give them a living wage, whether it be $15 an hour or $20 an hour, but we got to give them a living wage. Also, I think it's very important. We must make sure that, I know there's an Equal Pay Act, but we must make sure that that's being implemented. Okay, women should not make less than a man if she's doing the same job, bottom line. So we need to make sure we have equal pay for those that are working. Also, as I said before, we need people to fill jobs. So I think that we can work with the employers and also work with the employees to come up with a good match to fill certain positions. And again, I think it's crucial to give a living wage. What is the living wage in this area? Living wage in this area may be different from a living wage, in another state or city or whatever, but we need to make sure that we have a living wage. Thank you.
Wade?
Sure. Well, I would agree that step one is increasing the minimum wage to $15. When we talk about workforce development, though, we're talking about an intersectionality of issues here. So education, I spoke before about early childhood education and daycare. That's a working issue, because if mother and daddy can't get away from the house because of a lack of quality childcare, then they can't work. So let's address that and make sure we've got it. I was at a lunch last week, business lunch, where a woman had brought her 2-month-old son to the lunch because she's on 14 wait lists for daycare for her son. Let's address that. Healthcare. If people are unhealthy, we know all about underlying conditions because of the pandemic. And in our area, that's obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. Those are preventable or manageable diseases, chronic diseases. Let's make sure people have the resources they need and the education they need and the access they need early in their lives, so they have healthy, productive lives and can stay in the workforce. Unions. Any good Democrat should be talking about unions. Unions have safety programs. Unions have apprentice programs and training programs. To the extent that the law has tilted against unions, we need to tilt it back in favor of unions. And then what I said before about infrastructure, let's make sure that the money gets to our district in a fair way. And one other point that we haven't talked about this evening is immigration. Let's fix the immigration issue in this nation. Let's get people who want to work, who come to this nation to work and take advantage of its many opportunities. Let's do those kinds of things. Again, working across the board. It's a multifaceted problem. It's going to be a multifaceted solution.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Both of you, well, the majority of you mentioned the pay gap. And as you all may know, it has held steady since 2020. The data shows that Latinx and Black women respectively make between 57 cents and 64 cents every dollar to a Caucasian man. The only women that outpaced or even came close to white men were Asian women, yet African-American women are continue to be the most educated demographic. What would you do to ensure that the pay gap is addressed immediately? Because as stated by Ms. Griggs, the equity and pay bill is not working. So what would you all do to ensure that it will move forward? First, I believe Ms. Griggs would be up for this one.
Okay, great. Thank you so very much. Great question. And what you just said is what I researched earlier, that Black women are paid 0.63 cents for every dollar paid to the white man. And half of the Black women have less than $300 in savings, okay? So what I would do is, yeah, we may have this Equal Pay Act, but it's not being enforced. And I think what we're gonna have to do is put some teeth to that, okay? And for example, if we discover that a corporation, a company, or whomever is not abiding by the Pay Act, there gotta be some consequences. Sometimes you have to force people to do things for the benefit of everyone. And so in this case, I will work with my colleagues when I get to Washington to make sure we put some teeth into this Pay Act. And see, a lot of times people companies will go on and on and on because there's no enforcement of that. So I think we need to develop a strong arm of enforcing the Pay Act to making sure that we bridge the gap some, because it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible right now. And especially for minority women and also some men. So we definitely must push to bridge that. And I will fight with everything that is within me to make sure we add some teeth to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. Dr. Munroe.
Thank you, Dr. Grimm. First of all, I would like to congratulate the U.S. women's soccer team for their winning of the lawsuit to grant them 24 of equal pay. They are the first ones to make some progress. And we see this in sports and in all of the other companies that we work for, there is issues with pay, especially with women and minorities. And so for me, I would put together a workforce that would investigate the companies within our district to ensure that equal pay is given for equal jobs. It's so imperative. It's what I've lived in the military. We do not have anything based on the color of our skin or our gender. It is based on a pay scale, and you get that pay no matter what. And so we need to look at people getting paid for the job that they are doing, and it needs to be equal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe, and Mr. Herring. We'll conclude this question with you.
I think part of the solution is to, number one, acknowledge the reality. And that's what we've done here today, is acknowledge the reality of the pay gap between men and women, and particularly women of color. I think we've just passed what's called Equal Pay Day this week in March, where which recognizes, if you will, the differential between the pay that men and women receive. In terms of what to do about it, I think we need to make sure that the Department of Labor is properly funded, and so that the regulatory agencies like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission have the proper resources to do their job, and not starve those regulatory agencies to death. The Equal Pay Act is a bill that already specifically addresses the equal pay requirement in this country. Some have argued that the exceptions to the Equal Pay Act undermine the Equal Pay Act. And so to the extent that those exceptions need to be reviewed and modified by the Congress, then that would be something that the Congress could do as well. And finally, I would say that we need a congressional representative who will use the position to advocate for those issues. We don't have that now, and we haven't for a long, long time. And we need to make that change in Washington so that we have a representative who will be an advocate for these, recognizing the reality of these disparate issues and advocating to fix them, to make sure that equality is recognized for all our citizens.
Thank you. So the next question is the follow-up. Democrats need to, we preach a lot about living wage and taking care of our workers. So my question is, normally, sometime this year, Capitol Hill staffers have recently been discussing creating a union, and many have taken to social media to vent about how low the wages are and their exhausting hours. So we need to practice what we preach. Are you currently paying your campaign staff a living wage with health benefits? And should you win, will you commit to paying your staff a living wage? Let's start with Dr. Munroe.
Hi, thank you, Julie. So I agree with the staffers that they should have the ability to have a union, and the PRO Act is in support of the union. For my particular campaign staff, they have contracts and/or I have volunteers. And so they are paid based on the contract that we have formulated with each other, or they are in a volunteer status. Thank you.
Okay, Wade?
So I do have paid staff. They all make, quote, a living wage. A campaign, you find out pretty fast, is a small business that has to make tough choices. We do not have any group benefits except those that are required by law, workers' comp, of course, Social Security, those things are provided. But we have not tackled a group health plan for my very small staff. But I do want to say that for the direct staff, they are treated and paid as employees and not as independent contractors, because I thought it was important that they have the protection of employees, not simply as contract labor.
Thank you. Joyce?
Thank you so very much. I am in agreement with the staffers definitely making a living wage plus, because just getting up going to work, it takes a lot for most people. But I am in agreement of a living wage plus. And as far as my campaign, I have predominantly volunteers. However, we give them little fringe benefits when we do certain things. And of course, as money comes in, I give them bonuses and things of that nature. But I am definitely for a living wage. And if we talk this talk, we need to walk what we're talking and make sure that the people are giving a decent wage, a decent living. And I am in support of the staffers in Washington unionizing. I don't see anything wrong with that, because too often, sometimes they don't have anyone to speak for them. And of course, the union could be their voice, and that's what's needed sometimes. So I'm in support of unionizing. If they can do it, I say do it. And as far as my people, I give them, right now, like I said, we have majority volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. So statistics, we've been talking about healthcare and benefits, but the statistics have shown that coastal Georgia has some of the best health factors, but poor health outcomes. I know we've all heard the saying, health is wealth, but in many instances, low wealth communities especially are disproportionately affected with poor health conditions. There are many factors that are at work to guarantee a community is healthy. Therefore, as our next congressperson, what will you do to ensure that health equity reaches our communities, especially those most vulnerable? I will start that off, I'm sorry, with Mr. Herring.
Thank you. Again, every time I talk to groups, healthcare is always one of the things that I emphasize. Georgia is one of 12 states that has refused to expand Medicaid. It has a direct impact on health here in our district. It has especially a direct impact on maternal health and infant health. If the state of Georgia will not expand Medicaid, then Congress should do that for the state of Georgia. It would improve the access and the affordability of healthcare for women and for people of color, and have an immediate impact on better outcomes in our district. As I've discussed already this evening, we know all about underlying conditions, and here in our district, that's obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. So we need to make sure that people on the front end of their lives get better health education and better access to health care. One of the ways that we can do that is, number one, expand Medicaid. That would also improve funding for rural hospitals. Georgia has a high rate of hospital closures in rural areas. It doesn't make any sense. But also make sure that primary care doctors are getting incentivized to serve in underserved areas, but also nurse practitioners and physicians assistants. So those are some, I think, very common sense, achievable things that Congress could do pretty easily to improve health outcomes, and that would have a direct impact on our district. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Ms. Griggs?
Thank you, Dr. Graham. Health care equity, I tell you, that's a big one, because in our district, boy, we have very poor to very poor, okay, in the rural areas. And if we look at it, a lot of the rural areas do not have hospitals. They do not have the healthcare facilities that they need. So let me just speak on Medicare, Medicaid. Medicaid is a state program. Okay, that is a state program. The federal government doesn't own it. However, there's money at the federal level for the states for healthcare. So I would work with the state legislators to push to expand Medicare, Medicaid, I keep saying Medicare, but expand Medicaid. And that means you have so many more people on Medicaid and you have less people without any health care. Now, there's such a disparity, really, especially in the African American and other minorities communities. Diabetes, high blood pressure, you name it. Okay, a lot of them are on dialysis. They can't even pay. Some of them can't even pay for their medical prescriptions. So what I would do, number one, especially if there's a certain group that need that Medicaid expansion. And I would say, especially during the pandemic and even now, the Affordable Care Act, let's expand that. Let's not make it so difficult. But even I was talking with a girlfriend of mine who actually has nearly a PhD, okay? And she works for this company that doesn't offer health care. Poor thing, she couldn't afford to pay it because she was telling me it would be like $1,000 a month. And that's ridiculous. So we must make healthcare more affordable for all people. And definitely there's such a big disparity in healthcare in the rural areas. What I say we can do also, even mobile hospitals, put those mobile units in rural areas. We've got to do something because people are dying because of lack of healthcare.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs and Dr. Munroe.
Thank you, Dr. Grimm. The issue with health equity is truly access to care. And that there is two facets to that. Access to care means that we absolutely have to expand Medicaid in order to provide care to those in need. When I look at the statistics, there are 1.3 million people in this state without health insurance. Let me say it again, 1.3 million people in this state without health insurance. Over half of them are working, but they cannot afford the health insurance that is available to them because of the wages that are provided. So that's two issues there. There's the cost of health insurance in and of itself, but also the wage that we are providing for them. Then also, this state is a supervisory state, meaning that if you are a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, you have to have a physician who supervises your work. Now, in the military, in a lot of your northern states, 32 states to be specific, you do not have to have that supervisor. I've delivered over 1,000 babies. I've never had a bad outcome. Yet in this state, I have to have a physician who will supervise me. That's a problem. You have people who want to work in your rural areas. You have people who want to be in the rural areas taking care of women, children, families, and we need to change the laws of Georgia. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next question is regarding term limits. With so many members of Congress serving for decades, many pushing well into their 80s, are you willing to commit to a term limit? If so, how many terms? If not, why not? And overall, what are your thoughts on term limits? Let's start with Joyce.
Thank you very much, Judy. I am all for term limits. Even before I ran for Congress, I said, boy, we need term limits. Okay, and really, I said, if we could put term limits on the Supreme Court, we need them there also, but I know we can't. But in any event, maybe, I know Congress is on a 2-year term. And unfortunately, you can do some things, but you can't get accomplished what you want in Congress, okay, in 2 years, because you're learning your way around and you just can't. So I definitely would agree with term limits. Maybe 3 terms, 6 years. Maybe you're there for 6 years, but I don't think you should be there for life. You shouldn't die in place, okay? So we need to open it up and institute a program where we have term limits. And I was signed to term limits. I agree with term limits, and we need them. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Munroe?
Thank you. I also believe in term limits. And when I think about our president, they are limited to 2 terms. So why isn't that the standard for all elections? Why, or elected officials? If they were limited to 2 terms, they would have to make the changes that they wanted to make within a quick amount of time. And that would be a standard that was set across the board. And we would not have elected officials who become complacent and don't make change. Thank you.
Wade?
Yes, I'm in favor of term limits. And again, when I speak, I talk about this. My idea would be 4 terms max. That's 8 years. It's only a 2-year term for a representative. And my idea would be that we make this change in Washington. We send Mr. Carter home. I want to be the one to do that. And then what I'll do is work on developing bench strength in our district, that we build up the Democratic Party in this district, get some younger people lined up and queued up, and then I step aside. But term limits is part of the solution to the stagnation in Washington right now.
Thank you. Dr. Grimm, do you want me to take the next question?
Please forgive me. I do believe, I'm so sorry. As you all know, I have multiple things going on in my house. But to the end of term limits, I wanted to talk about something that, many of us kind of don't want to talk about. And I believe it also has to deal with term limits and those who are making decisions for those who are not necessarily at the table or viewed. So when it comes to, I'm trying to, please forgive me, my daughter just came in here. When it comes to the issues in local municipalities, institutions, and organizations, a lot of them are declaring racism as a public health crisis. While legislative and governing bodies are not as diverse as the people that they serve, in thinking of that, what types of policies would you like, or can you institute to address systemic racism? We'll start with you, Dr. Munroe.
Thank you, Dr. Grimm. Well, racism is an issue that we must take a look at. And one of the things is the issue is white supremacy. There has been so much white supremacy across the board, and slavery, it started with slavery and it hasn't stopped. We still see examples of racism today. And people like me have implicit bias and explicit bias, and we have to understand what those are. And I see people that are not willing to understand their own bias, and so this issue doesn't get better. But within racism, we must address and acknowledge history. And when we do that, we actually help to educate people. What I see is that our younger generation has less of a stigma behind racism than we do as an older generation. And they have embodied people as humans. And that's what we need to do. Every person has differences, and we need to recognize that each person needs to be recognized for who they are. But we need to put policies in place that also will help to understand racism in and of itself. And so that starts with taking a task force and looking at the policies that are currently in place to address racism that happens from many different facets of life. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe. Ms. Griggs?
Okay, thank you so very much, Dr. Graham. Systemic racism is still real. It's alive and well in 2022. Okay, it's deep rooted, it's embedded, and unfortunately, there is still a lot of white supremacy, white privilege. Okay, I mean, we see it all the time. It's unfortunate, but it's true, because African Americans, other minorities have made this country what it is. As a matter of fact, truth be told, African Americans built this country. We made it great off the blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors. And our ancestors worked for over 400 years and no paycheck. And who would want to do that? So number one, what I would suggest is that, some say we need to make sure there's policy in place. There are policies in place, but the people there, some of them just don't want to change, okay? Because they still have this white superiority complex that they are right. Now, I say we need to make sure that we have education at every level so that they can understand that there is still systemic racism. People need to be educated. Let me just point out just briefly with this, the CRT, that critical race theory, the Republicans have used that against the Democrats. That's how that guy won in Virginia. But bottom line is, it's not taught at that level. And even the present representative brought that up and passed a bill called the Parents Act. And that basically, if you say anything about what has happened in the past, and this, that, and the other, on and on. But the Bible says that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So we must come to grips with that and accept it for what it is, and realize that it is real, that it's alive, and we need to discuss it. We need to come together as a people. If not, we're going to destroy ourselves. We must be real. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. Mr. Herring?
Yes, so number one, we've got to deal with the truth of the history of this nation, but that's the history of this nation. And politicians should not be legislating what is and what is not taught in our classrooms. And that's become a distraction from the reality of what's before us. Everything that I talk about is to address the issue of justice and equality for all, which is the promise of America. So January 6th, which is the reason that I'm running, it was a white supremacist crowd who took over the Capitol building, and then Representative Carter voted that night to overturn the election. That's wrong. He needs to be held accountable. The Senate bill that was passed in Georgia in January of last year was to make it harder for all of us to vote, but especially for people of color to vote. That's wrong. That's why we need federal legislation on voting rights. Education is a transformative tool that changes people's lives. That's why it's so important that we educate our young children and that mother and daddy have childcare if they need to go work so they can provide for their families. Healthcare, we need to expand Medicaid. The impact of the failure to expand it has a greater impact on women and babies of color. I haven't gotten to talk about the environment yet this evening, but we've got 3 Superfund sites in this district, depending upon how you count them, maybe 4. They're all in Glynn County. They impact communities of color. We need to make sure to clean up those Superfund sites. We need to admit the reality of climate change, admit the reality of rising sea levels that impacts most severely communities of color. So everything I'm talking about is within the ambit of addressing those historical and systemic problems. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So right now, since you brought up environmental issues, I wanted to go ahead and ask a question about the port. And so we have Savannah Port and we have the Brunswick Port, which are actually expanding thanks to Senator Ossoff and Warnock. So Savannah and Brunswick ports are recognized as the backbones of the Southeast, and they're close to outpacing the port in Long Beach, California. On the other side of the coin are the environmental health and physical health issues that port communities are experiencing. What immediate and long-term relief efforts would you employ to mitigate the urgent public and environmental health concerns? And how do we respect our fragile environment as we continue to dredge and widen our ports? Let's start with Mr. Herring.
Well, I think, number one, you acknowledge the reality that the ports, and we can use the plural, it's one port authority, but Savannah and Brunswick is an economic driver, not just for the region, not just for Georgia, but for the nation. I mean, those are economic dynamos that drive this region. So I think what we have to do, though, is to be mindful of the environmental impacts and to have someone who's willing to speak up on that side of the equation too. You know, part of the problem in Washington is we make questions into all or nothing. Well, if that's your mindset, all or nothing, then you end up with a whole lot of nothing. That's what happens there. So it's about pragmatism, and it's about looking at the facts and looking at the data and what is the specific issue. The deepening of the harbor is one specific issue. We need to look really closely. Are we going to keep doing that? Can we keep doing that? Or do we pose a risk to the aquifer? Do we pose a risk to inland marshes that need to have more fresh water mixed with that salt water? So it's a fact-based, pragmatic, decision-driven process, but not an all or nothing. It can't be that.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Joyce?
Thank you so much, Julie. Looking at the ports, let's face it, we know that produces thousands of jobs and really add to our economy, which is absolutely great. Now, reference, there's been expansion, there's been a deepening, widening of the rivers for the ports, for larger ships, et cetera, and all that's good. What I would say, though, is we must have a balancing act, okay? I would say what I would do is make sure that I hired or we retain the services of experts, because there are a lot of experts out there, especially environmental experts, how this would impact on our environment. And we definitely would need that. Okay, it does create jobs, these ports. I mean, a bunch of them, but at the same time, there's some problems associated with it. Again, I would say, let's do some studies. And studies have already been done. Let's look at the pros and cons of it. Let's look at the neighborhoods, the areas that would be impacted the most. Are they unjustly or unfairly impacted? So I think we need to look at the whole picture. And I think we can't just throw the baby out with the wash. We got to balance it. What's good for our environment? What's good for the people in the area? And then also our economy, the jobs. Savannah, like you said, Savannah and Brunswick, we have some great ports. So I said we must balance it. Bring in the experts, use some of the experts we've already have, and let them give us the results of the studies that they've done, the environmental impact, the impact on the local communities in that area. We would need a balancing act. And I will work with those agencies, those groups, to come up with a feasible analysis of what is going on, feasibility studies, okay? So that's what balance. I say we need balance in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. Dr. Munroe?
Thank you, Julie. The ports are so important to our economy in this area, but you're right. There are issues in and of itself with the growing of these local ports. And one of the things is the environmental protections. And so we need to work with the Environmental Protection Agency to ensure that the regulations that are put in place for this expansion do not decrement the wildlife that are in these areas from the dredging, because so many of the people within the Gullah Geechee corridor rely on the food source in that water. And by dredging and expanding those ports, we jeopardize their actual existence from the wildlife that's there, from the sea life that's there, but also from a personal and family perspective. And so we do need to balance all of the issues here to make sure that, yes, we can grow our ports, but we do it in a way that we hold people accountable and we follow the regulations in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe. So I know a lot of us are watching everything that's going on in real time in the news. Locally, we've had some families that have been impacted due to the war in Ukraine. Some people are even calling it the beginning of World War III. And as one, I hope not. Some believe that Putin needed this war in order to stabilize his economy in Russia. What tactics do you believe we need to employ to divert a war, yet help the Ukrainian people secure peace and safety in their country? And we'll start with you, Mr. Herring.
Well, number one, let's keep in mind the men and women in uniform who have already been deployed from Fort Stewart and Hunter to Europe, and pray for their safety. And of course, we keep them in our prayers and in our hearts. What I think this crisis shows is the importance of American leadership in the world. We cannot disengage. We cannot live in isolation. That's what the previous administration tried to do. President Trump denigrated the NATO alliance. This crisis has shown the importance of the NATO alliance. It's shown the importance of American intelligence services. And so we need to be a leader in the world, but also work with our allies such as NATO. That means we need a strong military. The military needs to be properly funded. But that also means taking care of our men and women in uniform to make sure that they're properly cared for. And then after their service is complete, make sure that our veterans are also properly taken care of. One of the things I continue to hear as I campaign throughout the 15 counties of this district is that veteran services are not what they should be. That's wrong, and that needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Dr. Munroe.
Thank you, Dr. Grimm. Yes, it's a terrible sight right now, watching everything that's happening with Russia and the Ukraine. And my heart goes out to the people there as well as the people here, because we have had a number of soldiers deployed in an effort to support this war over there. But historically, we've actually had troops in the Ukraine border and in Poland for a long period of time. And we've done that to have a presence along those borders and to deter anything like this from happening. So we are prepared to have that show of force. And by putting the soldiers that we have currently and expedited over to Europe, we have increased the numbers so that we can show that we are ready. And when we partner with our NATO forces, we are ready. We are ready to support and defend this nation in every way we can. And so I appreciate President Biden's use of the national instruments of power. He is working very hard for diplomacy. He's using the information that he has available to him, and he's using that military effort in a way to hopefully deter so that we do not have to attack in this military power. We don't want to see that happen, but the economy has seen the effect of our sanctions, and we need to continue those sanctions across the board so that there is some meat felt on the Russian side. And we will continue to do that. We will stand up and fight for our freedom because we are the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe and Ms. Griggs.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, having been in combat, okay, and as an intelligence officer, I saw a lot of things. And of course, the average American couldn't see what I saw because I had the highest level security clearance. I had a clearance so high that I had the clearance that the president had, okay? But in any event, what I would like to say is, number one, people may be surprised at this, but we have no national security interest in the Ukraine. First of all, Ukraine isn't in our neighborhood, so to speak, okay? It's located, it's not located on our borders, nor do we have a military base there. It doesn't have a strategic oil reserve, and it's not a major trade partner. So those are some things. Now, I think President Biden has been wise because to provide sanctions and things of that nature. We cannot put troops there. It is not a member of NATO, okay? But we can institute sanctions against Russia. Also, we have to be very careful. You know, the Soviet Union is a nuclear power. We do not want to do anything to start the nations to start popping nukes. We've got to be very careful. So I think he's doing the right thing right now as far as the sanctions, okay? And I am concerned about the Ukrainians. We're all concerned, okay? But we got to be very careful because like some people say, is this going to be World War III? See, Russia, I think, is crazy. When I was in the military, the only thing we studied before the Berlin Wall fell was Soviet tactics. We knew what they were going to do. We knew what they will employ. And when you see them moving certain ways, you knew what they were about to do. But what I will say is that we have to be very careful on this and make sure that we don't make any mistakes that would drag us into something that would impact the world. See, I don't think Russia, for whatever reason, they have a lot of nuclear weapons. So we have to be real careful. But thank you very much, but we need to walk careful. And I support what President Biden is doing. And I think also we need to be careful where we place our troops. We cannot be all over the world. Just like Afghanistan, we got to be careful and limit where we are. Thank you.
We're now going to mix in a few questions that we have had our viewers ask tonight on Facebook. And the first one is, what should be done about the smell from the industrial plants in Brunswick and the surrounding areas? I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we've had really bad smells, and they've determined that it has come from some of our industrial corporations around here. So what would you do to help get rid of that smell? Let's start with Joyce.
Okay, basically, we had the same smell here in Savannah at one point. And of course, they started, I guess, filtering more, et cetera, et cetera. But then I think that's where we would need the Environmental Protection Agency, which is a federal agency, to come in, or if they haven't been in already, and make recommendations to those plants in that area. And let's face it, those plants produce jobs, okay? And people need to work. But we need to make sure we protect our environment, because in Savannah, there were plants that were emitting like soot and dust, and it was in a poor neighborhood, okay? And a lot of those people ended up with respiratory issues, asthma, etc. So I will say, I will work with those in authority, those in charge, to make sure we have the Environmental Protection Agency come in to try to get rid of the smell pollution in those areas like they did in Savannah. And I will look to see what happened in Savannah to use maybe the same model up in that area. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Griggs. Dr. Munroe.
Thank you for that question. The smells in the area are related to and can affect healthcare and people's health in and of itself. So we need to look at the safety of the workers as well as the surrounding community. And so I would suggest that OSHA actually come in there and do a survey or an inspection to check to see where these smells are coming from and determine what is causing it so that they can provide us a solution that would help all. If it has to do with the business in and of itself, we need to hold them accountable. And so there may need to be some funding that is given to people in the surrounding area if they've had an impact from this smell or to their health care, to their health personally. Sorry. Thank you.
Mr. Herring?
Well, of course, anyone who goes up and down the coast can smell the smells from the plants. I do think it's primarily an issue for the Environmental Protection Agency, and to make sure that, number one, what could a member of Congress do? Number one, make sure that there's an advocate for the people of this district. Number two, make sure that the agencies like EPA are doing their job. Number three, make sure those agencies have the right resources and funding to do their job. So those would be the things that I would do, is within that framework of the EPA. It may additionally be an OSHA issue. OSHA is going to be limited to employees. I think number one is the EPA.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. A question from Micah. They ask, where do we stand with an equal rights amendment that includes the LGBTQIA+ community? I'll toss it to you first, Ms. Griggs.
Okay, thank you so very much.
You're muted, Ms. Griggs.
Okay, it is very important that we treat all people as human beings. LGBTQ, you know, you name it, Black, white, green, yellow, Latinos, Blacks, everybody. We've got to make sure that we treat all people the same. And I would push, when I'm in Congress, to make sure that laws are in place to protect all people, that equal rights for all people and non-discriminatory practices, even though we still have a lot of them, okay? So that means that even those laws that we have on the book already need to be strengthened. We need to reinforce, we need to strengthen. As a matter of fact, we need to make sure that those that violate those laws are punished. I would like to also say, we have the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And if a person feels they've been discriminated against based on race, sex, sexual orientation, can go to the EEOC and ultimately, okay, the EEOC normally would give you a right to sue, and you can sue that employer or whoever is discriminated against you. But I will push to make sure and strengthen the Equal Rights Amendment and make sure it's not gutted like so many of the other laws have been gutted by, unfortunately, the Republicans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. Mr. Herring?
So my approach as a candidate and my approach as a representative will be to listen and learn from the people of this district and put those issues front and center. I've met with the executive director and the volunteer director of the local Pride Center and heard their concerns. The Supreme Court has expanded equal protection for gay and transgender people already, but there's still gaps. And one of those gaps is in housing. So that's why the Equality Act that's been proposed is important and why it still needs to be passed, even though the Supreme Court in the Bostock case expanded protections for gay people and transgender people. And this is a family issue. You know, one of the saddest stories I've heard about are the parents of trans people who are so desperately want to make sure that their child has a fair shake in this world, and they're at a loss because they don't know what resources to turn to. They don't know where to get help to even know how to advise their child. So what can a congressional rep do? Let's make sure that Equality Act passes so those gaps that still exist in the law for gay people and trans people get closed.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Dr. Munroe.
Thank you, Deidre. I want to first say, Micah, you are enough. And so many people in the LGBTQIA+ community feel like they are not. And it is so important for you to hear, for anyone to hear, that they are enough. And I will fight for every member of this district in a way that they have not seen before, because we need to represent, a congressperson needs to represent every single person in this community. And so I want to say that I will fight for you, and I will fight for every single person in this district. But most importantly, we need to recognize that there are differences in people, not in the LGBTQIA+ community. There are differences with our disability community. But what I know is that there's strength in every person. And we need to recognize those strengths and capitalize on them, because when we do that, we will win as a district and we will win in Georgia. So thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go back to our questions from community members for a minute, and then we'll go back to some Facebook questions. This one, we'll begin with you, Mr. Herring. As voters consider the three of you, tell us specifically what you think sets you apart from the other two candidates and how that will advantage you as you attempt to unseat Buddy Carter. Mr. Herring?
I've been serving this community for 35+ years. My first board service was on the Frank Callan Boys and Girls Club. I've been a volunteer for the Boy Scouts. I've been a volunteer for Georgia Appleseed to stop the school to prison pipeline. I've been a volunteer for Georgia Legal Services to make sure that everyone has access to justice. So my current role as a candidate, and then when I'm elected to Congress, will be a continuation of that 3 decades plus of service. I'm a hard worker, not afraid of it. I'm doing the hard work necessary to run a campaign, a real campaign, a campaign that has volunteers and employees, a campaign that has raised money so that we can get the Democratic message out to the people of this district, and that we can send Buddy Carter home. That's the key thing here. Let's send that oath breaker home in November. I'm the candidate who can make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Ms. Griggs?
Thank you very much, Julie. Well, what I would like to say, all of my life experiences have prepared me for such a time as this. Having grown up dirt poor in the middle of 10 children, being the middle, my mom, dad didn't have a formal education, having worked my way through college and bachelor's, master's, and having obtained a law degree as a single parent, okay, and starting my own law practice. But all my world experiences and being a combat veteran, an intelligence officer, all the experiences of my life have prepared me for such a time as this. I understand what it's like to be dirt poor. I understand what it's like to literally pull yourself at the bootstrap. I understand what it's like to be knocked down consistently, but yet get back up because you saw more. I saw more in the people and also what I could do for them. And you know, I am a fighter. I can't be bribed. I can't be bought. And I'm the better candidate. I tell you what, I didn't give money to Republican candidates and then run as a Democrat. If I'm a Democrat, I'm a Democrat, okay? People can do what they want. Also, I would like to say, as a woman, I understand what it's like as far as the pay equity issue. Okay, I understand that being Black and a woman, I was never given the pay that I deserve, commensurate with my qualifications and experience. So I know what that's like. I will fight for equal pay for all people. Also, I understand those disenfranchised, those in the hood, so to speak. You see, I can communicate with those in the hood, those in between, those at the top level and in the military. I learned a lot of negotiating skills, even in the courtroom, okay? When I practiced law, I learned how to negotiate, how to come up with a solution, how to accomplish the mission, especially in the military. We had a mission to do, and guess what? We accomplished that mission because we worked together. So I know how to work together with people, and I am the better candidate for this position. Yes, I've run before, but look at the numbers, okay? Because I have the heart of the people. The people need a strong voice in Washington that will articulate their needs, and I will articulate their needs. I will listen to the people, and I will drive on based on what they tell me. Thank you very much. I am the better candidate. Thank you.
Dr. Munroe.
Thank you, Julie. So I just want to share a little bit about me. I am Dr. Michelle Munroe, and that doctor is in a doctorate of nursing practice. So I'm not a physician, but it's a doctorate of nursing practice. And that is a degree, a doctorate level degree that looks at the evidence that's available and puts that into practice and policies. And so it's a policy level degree in nursing. The other thing I would say is that I have been to the Army War College. So I have a master's in strategic studies. And with that, I am prepared to work on national security. That's what a congressperson does. You help with national security. I have been prepared for that through the Army War College. I also have those life experiences that Joyce talks about. I have broken glass ceilings. I was, as I said previously, the first female commander at Wynn Army Community Hospital. I also have had life experiences. Yet I have been divorced. I have been a single mom by myself for 6 years. I raised my kids and was a military officer at the same time. And my kids said to me, I actually said to them, I think I should retire. And they said, no, Mom, you need to keep going, because we always said that that's what we would do. And that's what I believe. They have that servant heart because they've seen a mom who's been a leader. And speaking of being a leader, as part of being in the military and active duty, we lead people from all walks of life. And so I have had over 1,800 employees at Wynn. And as I mentioned earlier, have 85,000 beneficiaries, $131 million budget. So I believe that I have the qualifications that are needed for this position. Now, let me talk about how I will beat Buddy Carter. So for Buddy Carter, it's important that we use his actions against him. So he recently voted against veterans. He voted against veterans who have been exposed to burn pits and toxic waste. And he said that they weren't worthy of him voting yes for their disability rights. That's not okay in my book, and it will never be okay. And so when I look to beat Buddy Carter, I will use what his actions have been against him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe. Triana posed a wonderful question. We rely on tourism here in the coastal Georgia area as an economic driver, but it's also being affected by the port. So how do you balance tourism as well as the environmental impacts of the port to ensure that all Georgians or coastal Georgia are safe? If I'm asking that correctly, Triana? Mr. Herring, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, yes, tourism is important for the economy of Southeast Georgia. But I think number one, we need to focus on the people who live here year round. Let's make this a good place for them to live. And let's keep it a special place for people to visit. The people I talk to as I travel this district, one reason they live here is because of the beauty of this place, the special sense of place. Our district, the first district, includes the entire coast of Georgia, 14 barrier islands, the Altamaha River Basin, one of the great river basins of the world, the Okefenokee Swamp, one of the natural wonders of the world. So those do have to be protected. And that's why I consistently talk about the environment, to make sure that those places are protected, because they're inherently a part of this special place where we live. But if we destroy that, it's not going to be a good place for people to live or for people to visit. We've already talked about the port. The port is an economic driver for us, but we're going to have to make hard, fact-based decisions about how the port expands and grows. So the environment, though, has got to be part of any representative's portfolio, if you will, is to be a steward of this special place that we call home. And that should be number one, is the people who live here. And if it's a good place to visit, great. They can come enjoy it also.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Dr. Munroe.
Thank you, Dr. Grimm. So Savannah is known for tourism, but yet I don't see that across, I see it across some of our islands, but not across our entire district. And so we are growing as a tourism location in coastal Georgia. And what I do know is that hospitality is one of the main tourism issues and economies in the Savannah and coastal Georgia area. And when I met with the Tourism Leadership Council, it was a lot of the hospitality workers and executives who were there talking about tourism and its effect on the economy. So it is important. But you're right, Triana, the ports are just as important, and the surrounding people are as important. So we need to be cognizant of a couple of issues. So in 2018, the Brookings Institute did a study, and in that study, they found that Black rural real estate was valued at half the price of what it was actually worth. And so we cannot afford to allow that to happen as Brunswick expands. If they take on anything, we have to make sure that that real estate and the owners of that real estate are compensated in a way that values their real estate and that land. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe and Ms. Griggs.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Grimm. Yes, tourism is definitely critical, especially in the Savannah area, okay? And some people actually go beyond Savannah, Brunswick, and other places, especially from up north and places. But tourism is very important. Let's face it, tourism provides a lot of money to our local economy, okay? And we make money from tourism, hotel taxes, etc. Now, what I would like to say, though, our environment is so important. If we don't have clean air, clean water, clean food, as far as our environment, we're killing ourselves, okay? And it's not going to do any good if we have all the tourists in the world, but if we don't have clean air and water. Our ports, though, are very important. And this, again, I would say we must have a balancing act, okay? What are the impacts of our ports? Oh boy, so much money comes through our ports. You know, I mean, we are well known from one end of the world really to the other because of our ports. But at the same time, we must balance everything out. And I guess I keep talking about balance because sometimes we can be lopsided. and just push this issue or push that issue. But I think we must look at the totality of the circumstances and how they impact us and how they impact not only us, but our children and our children's children and our economy, our environment. So I say definitely we need a balancing act in all of this again. As Congresswoman, I'm level-headed. And again, I will listen to my constituents and hear what they say and articulate those needs in Washington. Thank you.
Okay, this is another question. We're about ready to start wrapping this up, but we're going to take one more question from Facebook. And the question is, how do the candidates feel about the rapid increase of homelessness and facilities being maxed out across the district? Would you be willing to put this issue as one of your top 5 issues to deal with? Let's start with you, Ms. Griggs.
Okay, we're talking about homelessness. Boy, homelessness is such a big issue, and it breaks my heart. Especially before the pandemic, we would go to the homeless camps right here in Savannah, and we would take food, etc. And I went with the VFW that I'm a member of, and we would go out and especially find homeless veterans, if they didn't get VA benefits, or try to get them to the hospital, try to get some support for them. Okay, so homelessness hits close to my heart. Just this week, I had a friend who they found his son dead in the park here in Savannah. It appears that he froze to death. He had become homeless. He was a veteran, okay? So we should not have one homeless person in America, let alone a homeless veteran. After all, they served this great country and they deserve a lot more. So I would definitely push an agenda to make it mandatory that we come up with housing and prevent homelessness. I mean, classes, we find these people. Instead of them seeking us out, I would send out like bloodhounds to seek out the homeless to help them. I know some people don't want a home. Some people want to be homeless, but those that really want help, I will push to make sure to have a task force in my office on homelessness. Here in Savannah, it's absolutely sad about the homeless population. Down in Camden County, I worked with this, like I said before, this minister. He had a shelter where ultimately he got space for women, okay? And he also fed them. There was a church that helped him out, Dr. Ham, okay? So I will push that. Also, I will push to make sure we have shelters, places for women. There's too often women are being left out, women and children. There's a lot of homeless people right here in Savannah, Georgia, homeless families. They're staying in hotels. They're staying in their cars. I've talked to them and it's absolutely sad. They catch the school bus at a certain, I talked with Dr. Ann Ledette last week, and that was one of the issues. She said, yeah, we have a lot of homeless children here, okay? And they have to give some type of address or whatever, but they normally live in these hotels, and a lot of them live in their cars. So homelessness is close to my heart, and I will fight with everything that is with me and within me to make sure we take care of this issue, especially veterans. I want to point out just briefly, Julie, I'm on the board of Golden Hours Veterans Village. We're okay.
No, I didn't want to cut you off.
Okay, I'm on the board of the Golden Hours Veterans Village, and we're building South Newport Church in Darien. Actually building the house, and we're going to take them to the location on G Street and MLK in Brunswick for homeless veterans. So I think that's great, and I will push for things like that. I will push for grants. I will push for monies for the homeless veterans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. Mr. Herring?
Yes, there needs to be a federal response to the problem of homelessness. It is partly a veterans issue, so we need to address it that way. One of the biggest issues is mental health, though. There's a lack of mental health funding and mental health resources in this country. And the best response that the federal government could make would be to improve funding on the mental health side of things. And then finally, there is an affordable housing issue. Again, the federal response would be through tax credits, Section 8 housing that it's actually works the way it's supposed to. So homelessness should be the priority of any member of Congress, and it would be a priority of mine.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Dr. Munroe?
Thank you, Julie. Homelessness is an issue, but it's not just a first congressional district issue. It's not just a Georgia issue. This is an issue across our country, and it does need to be addressed. And one of the issues that we need to look at is the underlying cause of the homelessness. Is it the fact that there isn't, there a lack of affordable housing? Is there the fact that is there a mental health issue that needs to be addressed? Is there truly a desire to be where they are? So we need to look at those underlying issues to determine the solutions that are right for this country in order to make a change. And that without doing that, we will never see improvement. So addressing those underlying issues are what I would do as a congressperson and what I think needs to be done as a country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Munroe. A great mentor of mine taught me that the reason or my passion for doing anything was my why. So I'd like to know why we should vote for you all. Why are you doing this? And if there's an issue that we have not covered, to speak to it and tell our viewing audience at the end of the day why you're the best candidate to beat Buddy Carter one more time. So thank you for joining us this evening. We are not closing out fully right now, but I'll start with you, Mr. Herring.
I've been a servant of this community for over 3 decades. I've been a problem solver. That's what my job is as a lawyer, is to listen to people, understand what their needs are, and solve problems. January 6th is my why. I never thought in our lifetimes we would see a violent insurrection at our nation's capital. I never thought that we would see congressional people stand up to vote to overturn the election after that violent insurrection had taken place. And I decided last year that I had to stand up and do something. I've put my law practice on hold, and I've been devoted my full time and energy to building a campaign and to raising the money and to employing the people and to getting volunteers to do what is necessary to run a real campaign, to get the message to the voters, and to win in November. And that's what I've been doing since I announced last July. So why? I'm motivated by a very bright line, January 6th. I'm motivated to do the hard work necessary to build a campaign and to raise the money to get the message out to beat Buddy Carter, who, by the way, has about $2 million sitting in the bank. He's never been tested before, not really. I intend to test him, and I intend to send him home. I'm a demonstrated problem solver, and those same skills I will bring to the table as a representative for all the people of this district, so that all the people of this district have a voice. America has promises to keep. I want to work to keep those promises. I'm not looking backward at yesterday. I'm looking ahead because I still believe in the hope of America. That's why I'm running.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Dr. Munroe.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all tonight and to currently share my why. So my why has to do with Buddy Carter himself. You see, I met with Buddy Carter. I met with him and talked to him about the state of healthcare in this district. And I met with him specifically about maternal and infant mortality. And when I spoke to him, he said, that's not my issue. That's a state issue. Well, as a congressperson, I believe that it is his issue, because every constituent in this district is his issue. And I believe that as a federal congressperson, it's your job to collaborate and communicate to the state legislatures so that there is open lines of communication, because as a federal congressperson, you have that ability. You have that ability to talk and collaborate and communicate and to make change. And I don't see that change happening. What I see is Buddy Carter getting richer, and his focus primarily is on those people that make him richer. And I would be a candidate, I would be your congressperson that represents all. It's not just about Chatham County, it's not just about Ham County, but it's 15 counties, all the way to Florida, to Camden County. And it's all the way out to Applin County. Every single area has a different focus and a different issue. And your congressperson needs to be aware of them and fight for you and fight for them. Thank you very much. That's my why. I appreciate the time tonight.
Ms. Griggs.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Dem. My why is my children, your children, and our children's children. That's my why. I want to point out that I am not a politician. I am a servant for the people. I have served people all my life in different capacities. You see, a good leader, you're only a good leader if you were a servant first. And I have served all my life. Now it's time that I lead and that I represent the people of the 1st Congressional District. You see, I have the heart for the people. I have the passion for the people. And guess what? I have lived the people in the 1st Congressional District experiences. Yes, I have. By the various experiences I have personally lived, being a Black woman in America, being a highly educated Black woman, being a combat veteran in America, and not given the opportunities that I should. A woman who fought and upheld the Constitution of this great country. But yet at the same time, I was discriminated against. So you see, that's my why, so that no one else would have to go through what I've been through. Not your little girl, not your little boy, not any of them. That's why I'm running. I'm not running for fame, fortune, or money. That's immaterial to me. I am a servant. I was born a servant. You see, I was born a servant. I was born to lead. Okay, and I was trained to serve. I'm a fighter for democracy for all people. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what sex you are. Those are my why. Yes, Buddy Carter did some crazy things. Yes, he must go. Okay, but I tell you this, we must bind together and elect me as your next congresswoman. You see, I've walked that walk. I've walked many lives. I've walked your life. Yeah, I was poor, but yet I pulled myself up by the bootstraps, okay? And I worked and I worked and I worked. And I became Joyce Marie Griggs, someone that cared about the people, someone that will listen to the people, someone that the people know care about them. You see, I've been in the hood. I've talked with the people in the hood. I've been where people have died. I've been with the Ahmaud Arbery's family. I've cried with them. I've prayed with them to the very bitter end. I am your better choice for the candidate of the 1st Congressional District. And I will fight for each and every one of you. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you. So, Ms. Newby, do you want to close it out?
Well, while Ms. Newby is taking, is on camera, I'd like to take the time to thank my DI partners in crime for being here this evening. We have some my wonderful sisters of the illustrious Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated in here. My wonderful sister sister from, oh, here he comes now. So we're gonna joke for a little while. My wonderful sister Adrienne from Zeta Phi Beta. Oh, excuse me. Miss Triana is here representing, oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. She's gonna get me. I'm sorry. I was coming there, yeah. The blue and gold. I think we have my fret, Mr. Marcus Thompson, representing Alpha Phi Alpha. Oh, listen, sir. He needs to turn off his camera. Alpha Phi Alpha. And then we have my big brother. I would be remiss if I did not say thank you for representing Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I think that's all we have listed here. Do we have any deltas, any kappas here that I've missed? I don't want to be, I would be remiss if I did not speak to, and even the iotas, please forgive me. But I want to make sure that we as, or part of the D9, get out and go to our sororities and fraternities to turn out the vote. This is very imperative for us to move forward. I thank the candidates for coming this evening and speaking with us. And so I'm going to, I thank you, Mr. Thompson. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna thank Ms. Newby. Do you have some words for us, Chairwoman Newby?
I can't unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes. You muted yourself, but I'd also like to thank our elected officials and those who are running for office for joining us this evening. Thank you all for joining us. We would not be as great if we weren't for you all.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yes, I think you can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I don't know what's going on, but my mic and camera has just kind of like blitzed out. But I just want to thank you all for coming together and helping put together such a wonderful forum. The candidates, to each of you, thank you so much for such informative buy-ins, and we are looking forward to helping educate the masses within the 1st Congressional District on your platform. Again, I ask that you share this forum tonight with every page, every social media outlet that you have, so we can all be well in tune with each and every candidate. And again, thank you, Coastal Georgia, for tuning in. And without further ado, good night.